slide?
I can see it, yes.
Okay, good. Good. So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board again. Mike Ulrich, Principal Transportation Planner here at Srtc. This is agenda item 7, and this presentation is associated with a memo on page 31. This is the third installment of our ongoing discussion series, and this month we're here to talk, of course, about safety. Lois mentioned in her comments our timeline for the discussion series, and to orient you with the rest of the series, you can see that timeline here on the slide. You'll remember that Lois presented on the general purpose of the MPO in January. Last month, Jason got us started with quality of life. The next month, Kylie will be back to discuss stewardship. You can also see some of those other elements that Lois pointed us to included on the timeline, all culminating, of course, with an approval of the priority list in December. The purpose of the series is to provide an opportunity for the Srtc board and their committees to build a deeper understanding of the topics that we're discussing in the series, dialogue and exchange ideas to advance transportation in the region, identify transportation need and future planning activity. We're going to talk quite a bit about that today, actually. Develop legislative policy positions and funding strategies where appropriate, and to refine metrics for project prioritization. This discussion series was developed in part based on some of the reaction we got to the unified list process. And you can see a summary of that process and that project list here on the slide. We heard that the board wanted to look closer at the screening criteria used for the list's development. That here is that screening criteria, and you can see denoted in light blue are the specific criteria we looked at for safety in the process. I'm going to enlarge it a little bit so you can see it better. For each project consider, we have, among other things, many other things that you can see listed on the screen here, we evaluated whether the project incorporated a countermeasure, and all a countermeasure is some design feature that counteracts a danger. That's what countermeasure means. You can think of things like rumble strips, median barriers, pedestrian hybrid beacons, roundabouts, things like that. Those are all countermeasures. But as we'll discuss in a minute, there's not always a direct correlation between a particular countermeasure and a positive safety outcome. So, but you can see that's one thing we looked at in our criteria here. We also asked if a project was identified in a state or local plan or on an approved prioritized list of safety projects. And I'm going to come back to that last one in a bit. So put a pin in that one. But before we get to that, I want to discuss where safety fits into the larger regional transportation framework. You can see our 6 guiding principles in the graphic on the right. And of course, safety fits into the safety and security guiding principle. These are all pillars of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And the plan describes safety in the context of design, construction, operation, and maintenance. So if we focus on design and construction for a moment, most near-term safety issues are addressed with that federal aid program we talked about in our last agenda item, the HSIP program. So 3 of our jurisdictions are eligible for funding under this program because they've developed and maintained a local safety plan. That, of course, means that all of our other members are not eligible for funding under this program because they don't have those local plans. Safety is unlike many of our other guiding principles in that we've got some developed criteria for measuring those outcomes. And we've talked about that over the course of the last couple meetings. And you guys are familiar with them now, right? These are fatalities, fatality rate, serious injury rate, non-motorist fatality and serious injury. And I've included number 6 here because our safety planning efforts are inclusive of our other partners who have safety plans and have set safety targets like the Transit Authority. So that one needs to be considered as well. Unlike Jason's discussion topic last week on quality of life, which may seem more abstract to measure, safety is much more concrete. We know where the crashes are occurring. You can see them symbolized here. This is data back to 2010. So we know where they're happening. We know where these fatal and serious injury crashes are happening. We also know where crashes that involve our most vulnerable users are occurring, and you can see those depicted on the map here. These are, again, bike and ped crashes since 2010. As I said earlier, most of the work to reduce fatal and serious injury is happening at the local level. We don't have a project in our MTP that's going to eradicate fatal and serious injury crashes. That incremental work is happening at the local level. In terms of work planning at the regional level for conditions Srtc can impact, there's things we have to do, like set targets, which this board just did, and things we can choose to do. There's a lot happening in terms of safety. And one of the themes of this discussion that I'll put back onto the board is, where does Srtc fit into all that? So law enforcement's doing things to impact positive safety outcomes. The health district, for example, is doing things to positively impact safety outcomes. Where can Srtc be the most effective in that framework? So one place we can start is to look at our systems and corridors. And this map helps us to contextualize crash severity. In this map, crashes that result in fatal and serious injury are weighted higher. Then we consider the volume on that facility and convert that severity to a rate. So what you're looking at here is, the darker the red, the more frequency of severe crashes per vehicle mile traveled on that facility. So hopefully this helps us zoom out from the intersection level and look at the corridors where the most severe crashes are occurring. You can see those denoted in the darkest red here. So when we zoom out, the value of a regional safety plan becomes more apparent. And we're going to talk more about work planning later in the presentation, but I wanted to include the concept of a regional plan here. There's a potential to make more safety dollars available, or to make those dollars available to more of our member jurisdictions, I should say, through the development of a regional safety plan. But before we talk about the solutions, we need to understand cause. So 82% of fatal and serious injury crashes are attributed to driver behavior. That's things like impairment, speeding, distracted driving, not wearing your seatbelt, drowsy driving. You can see all those depicted here. This is driver behavior. And these are conditions that can't necessarily be solved with engineered solutions. And that's the exact reason why the state invests heavily in education and enforcement programs. So we know it's 82% related to driver behavior. Let's dig into that 82% a little bit more. The colored bars that you see on your graphic here represent those 82% of the crashes that are attributed to driver behavior. And again, we talked about those things: impairment, speeding, etc. So the point I want to make on this slide is that until platooning connected autonomous vehicles are ubiquitous, that is, while humans are still driving cars, enforcement and education programs are the key to making a meaningful reduction in fatal and serious injury. Which again is why the state invests heavily in education and enforcement programs. And these interventions are detailed in the statewide safety plan, which you folks now know as Target Zero. Target Zero is investing tens of millions of dollars into those education and enforcement programs statewide. But for the skeptics out there, I just want to demonstrate that Spokane driver behavior isn't necessarily unique. Here's our planning area compared to the entire state. You can see it's pretty close. If you look at these same contributing factors statewide, they almost exactly mirror the state averages. We haven't done the analysis, but I would venture an educated guess that these numbers look similar to the national averages as well. So we know the problem. The question is, again, where does Srtc as an agency fit into the solution? When we think back to the context of the unified list, it's rare that a project comes forward whose only benefit is safety. Usually, instead, a project has many benefits, safety being one of them. So there's this question from an engineering perspective, but if we recognize that most of the fatal and serious injury crashes are a result of behavior, what more can we be doing from the planning perspective? So I wanted to give the board a couple of examples of what folks around the state have done in the past. So here's two examples from RTPOs around the state. So the Whatcom Council of Governments, this is the Bellingham area, they applied for Highway Safety Improvement Program dollars, and they developed what they call the Pedestrian Safety Grant. And this applied proven enforcement and education strategies to educate transportation planners and engineers on infrastructure treatments that will increase safety for vulnerable users in their region. Some of you also are probably familiar with the work that was done down in the Palouse RTPO around driver safety. And there, the Palouse RTPO partnered with other agencies, including State Patrol, to discuss strategies to communicate and improve the driving behavior, mostly of students, but also their families and community members who are traveling to school, traveling to football games, traveling in and out of the Palouse region. I also want to say here that SRTC has engaged in bike and ped education campaigns in the past. So we'd want to know from the board today, is this something the board would like to see staff become more involved in the future? So I've developed, or as a staff, we've developed some discussion prompts to help get the conversation started, and you can see those listed here. First, is there more information that the board needs to direct staff's activities? Is there more data you need, or would you like to see the data analyzed in a particular way? Second, and I've hit on this throughout the presentation, what role does SRTC play in impacting those contributing factors, that behavior that we discussed earlier? Third, in terms of our work program, our UPWP, how should we be addressing safety? Should we be developing a regional safety plan? Should more safety analysis be included in the UPWP? And finally, to tie things back to the unified list, how does safety factor into project prioritization? As a reminder, we're looking at other factors related to project criteria. You can see those denoted with the multicolored column headings. So we're looking not just at safety, but at a variety of criteria. And if you consider that 82% of fatal and serious injury crashes are related to driver behavior, how much do we want to factor that in safety with that understanding in mind? So there's a lot of things we can be doing as a staff. The question that I'll end with before I turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman, is what should SRTC be doing? As a region, how do we drive down crashes resulting in fatal and serious injury? So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, and I'll flip back to the discussion prompts to help guide that dialogue.
Thank you, Ms. Ulrich. Does everyone see these 4 items? Now, Mike, are you looking for discussion on all 4 of these today, or are you going to bring some of these back later? What are your wishes right now?
Well, we've just offered these as a springboard to start the conversation. So the board, a particular board member shouldn't feel obligated to speak to one of these 4, but we thought these might be helpful to just spur the conversation.
There you go. All right. Board members, does anyone have any questions, thoughts, comments regarding these prompts with regard to our safety side of things? It would be interesting to see if we had some way of affecting human behavior, but
looks like Kelly has her hand up, Mr. Chair.
okay, very good. Yeah, Kelly, please go ahead.
I have lots of thoughts and questions, and I think probably some more data wants. And I guess one thing I know, like, for example, our project out at the airport on Spotted Road, we know it has a safety component because those intersections have high incidences of accidents, and we've had fatalities out there. One thing I guess I was thinking of when you were putting up the map with all the areas of incidents, is there a way we can sort of overlay them with the existing projects too, so we really get a picture like high incident area, and then what's already been done? I was again thinking about the Spotted Road project, and the airport's put in significant mitigation projects in order to alleviate some of that. And it's kind of like we're basically at the last option that we have, which is the overpass there. So I guess one of my curiosities too is in some of those areas where there seems to be high incidence, I would be curious, has everything sort of been done there too, right? Just to get a better understanding around those areas. Is there more that could be done, or is it really purely just now we're at behavior, and behavior is, as we've kind of discussed, that's the hardest thing to get at. So where does our role lie there? So I guess I'm kind of thinking about it in 2 tracks, right? How do we better articulate the safety story in the projects that we as agencies or the community are putting forward? And then looking at where we do have high incident areas, what has been done, what can be done, and then, how do we sort of approach it from I'm going to call it more of a policy advocacy marketing standpoint, and to help support the state in their efforts to at a more localized level.
Very good. Thank you, Kelly. We have a hand up from Ms. Susan Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Transit has a great safety record over automobiles. So we should be looking at the whole picture. And one of the things that we can do is encourage people to ride transit. That lets me say, to use the opportunity to say that along with the great projects that Lois told us about earlier, the Division BRT project is in the state revenue plan for $50 million. It was there from the beginning of the conversations last year, and we are grateful for the leadership of Senator Billig and Representative Riccelli. But really, my point was to make that transit has a good safety record.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. As noted, there's always opportunity for a plug here. That's a very good comment. Thank you. I will add that when staff is asking for input on some of these, now is the time to speak up, because it is noted when you make comments and have some suggestions. So any other comments? Commissioner Cooney, I see your hand up.
Yes. So I guess it's one of those things for me, kind of, I still feel like I'm new to Srtc, even though it's been a year or two, that I get comments and questions from people all the time about, oh, there's been, fatalities at this intersection, or, lots of accidents at different intersections. And so I guess I would like it to be Srtc that is kind of the one who accumulates all that information from the different areas to, to show us, like you did on the map today. And as the regional, transportation, I just think that that's where I'd like to see it, rather than in each jurisdiction, having Srtc being the one to really accumulate all of that. And I agree with Kelly to then see where, when we're looking at what projects are happening, how that overlays, to those safety issues. So those are just my thoughts.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Well put. Mr. Larson, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think that it's important for us to discuss safety from two perspectives, and one is reactive. We like Mike said, we know where there are some crashes happening, and there are a variety of fixes that we can apply to those. Whether it's engineering and a roundabout or whatever it happens to be, education, all of those are reactive. And those obviously play a part, a huge part. But also there's the policy perspective of prevention. And I think that land use and land use decisions.
That's not it.
Land use and land use decisions, those drive the locations that happen in the future that we all have to then go react to. And so I think that land use has to be part of this conversation, at the very least from an advisory perspective. And so number two, what role does Srtc play in affecting human behavior? We need to have the idea of, what is approving some sort of development, whether it's residential or high density or whatever. What does it do to the safety of the corridor, like Mike was saying, or to the intersection? And I think that's a pretty important, prevention's a big part of this. That's my thoughts. Thanks.
Good point. Appreciate that. Just a reminder, everyone, if you're not speaking, just please mute your mic so we don't get any of this feedback. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments regarding safety, how we approach that? Let's see, not seeing anything else. Did you get enough there, Mr. Ulrich, to take that and run?
Yeah, that's helpful. And all of the comments we've heard so far are really helpful. I guess maybe to ask a point directly, and my colleagues, my coworkers might be kicking me for adding more work to our plates here, but as everyone has well articulated, this is a multifaceted problem, right? We know that there are multifaceted solutions like transit. We know there are multifaceted contributing factors like human behavior, like land use patterns. I'm wondering where the board sees the value of a regional plan around safety to start to coalesce some of the topics that we've heard and develop some of the policies that I think people are pointing to under one regional plan. Is there Is there a value in that the board sees? Or maybe some value, or maybe some lack of value or some complication that we haven't thought of yet.
Very good. Councilmember Weathers, I see your hand up. Good to see you today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good to be here. And just to respond to that from one of the smaller jurisdictions, I think number one, safety is a regional conversation no matter what, because you know, the more consistent we are together, the better we have the system or the regional impact. So I think that is really valuable, and I know it's really helpful for some of the smaller jurisdictions as well, who don't necessarily have a staff who can really help zero in and pinpoint and just kind of, you know, like you were saying, add more to your plates. It's the same, I think, in a lot of I think everyone shares in that respect. But you know, many hands can make light work. I think there's a lot of good perspective to be put in from various agencies and municipalities, and I think a regional plan is really important, because if we're all shooting at different targets, it just complicates how we prioritize this collectively.
Good. Thank you, Sonny. Mayor Cooper, I see your hand is up today. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm going from meeting to meeting, so sorry if I'm in my car, and I hope you can hear me, but I agree. I think a regional plan is really important, especially as, you know, how the growth in the West Plains, of course, we're all being connected more so than ever before. Another comment back to the earlier discussion, I think if we could, with that regional plan, identify the types of behaviors, if we had some sort of overlay of those, where those crashes are happening and what kind, like maybe some region has greater DUI, others have pedestrian problems, others have, you know, if we could identify the types of safety problems, and then that might help us. Is this a behavior problem? Is it an engineering problem? So understanding, I know, I think WASDOT tracks all of those crashes. And so I would just love to see what, if there's a greater type of problem in certain areas, and we could address it from that. And then, we could develop educational plans or engineering plans to address those. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Terry. Ms. Fukai, I see your hand up.
Yes, I'm just going to, agree with all the comments that have been said. I do agree there'd be some value. I always think there's value when we do regional planning. Again, respecting that each jurisdiction may have their own sort of nuanced parts of their plan. But again, if we look at it at a larger scale, a little more holistically, there's usually some large themes that pop up in areas in which we can be more collaborative and therefore more efficient and effective in our strategies to address it. And so I'm all about looking at ways to do that and to help all of our region, rather than, just be, sort of targeted and surgical in specific municipalities right now that have the capacity to do that type of study. So I'm totally in support of that. Not that, again, I want to add more work to your already full hands, but perhaps we maybe need to think about ways we can get more hands for you guys to do all this work that we're asking of you. So thanks for bringing that question back up.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Very good comments. Everyone's been contributing here. It's good to hear. Anything further on this item? Let's see here. Oh, someone's clapping. Oh, Mickey, that you're not wanting to talk. You're just clapping. Okay.
Oh, no, I want to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, then you've got the floor.
I didn't do it right. Okay. What I wanted to say was that one of the things that our small towns, we've got 4 of them on state highways. We don't get traffic counts done very often. The state highway, I know they have the ability, the county has an ability, but that really helps us a lot in order to forecast ahead of time. And we also need those for our comprehensive plan updates. So I don't know if that's a tool that could be more readily available than it has been, whether it's every 2 years or something, because our towns are growing down here, and having that information is really helpful, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, and Nikki, I can speak to that. I have a near-term suggestion. I don't perhaps have a long-term solution to that, but as part of our data project, we are collecting counts in the region to support the update to the travel demand model. And so, of course, Mickey, any of that data that we get by way of that project, I'll pass along to the smaller jurisdictions. It may not be as granular as you need for your local planning efforts, but we can get it to you, and hopefully it's useful. And then maybe we can continue that conversation about how to support the small towns and that traffic out program in the future.
Very good. Thank you, Mickey. Anyone else? Very good discussion. If there's nothing further, we'll